Good morning. This is Jennifer Kelly with the Garden Club of Alexandria. I'm going to give you a brief rundown on Art Nouveau flower arranging style. Art Nouveau period lasted approximately 20 years around the turn of the century, 1890 to 1920, thereabouts. And it was popular in both Europe and America. This period was known for its originality, and it crossed all creative arts of the period. Furniture making, interior design, glass, jewelry, and of course floral design. Artwork, and it wrapped around the arts and crafts movement of the time. It was known for its new appreciation of all things natural, simple, handmade, and organic. Japanese art had a major influence in this movement. It was also a reaction to the crude mass production products of the Industrial Revolution and the weighty darkness of the mid-Victorian era. The aspects that make it stand apart are asymmetrical balance, dominance in line, the curvilinear whip focus that draws the visual rhythm and flowing lines. The container is often taller than the material it contains. There are soft, muted colors, toning colors, and harmonious color combinations. Twining, undulating greenery such as vines, fern fronds, and tendrils. It emphasizes simplicity and line, restraint in plant material and blooms. The dominant features of an Art Nouveau floral arrangement is asymmetrical balance and strong lines. Containers are typically tall, simple, lightly decorated art glass, usually of rounded contour, matte finish, and decorated with images of flowers, insects, or birds. Colors are cool or warm, soft, muted, mauve, gray, dusty rose, buff, gold, ivory, silver, violet, green, pale yellow, peach, and whatnot. The design shape, of course, is asymmetrical with a dominance of a curved line. And the line has been described as a sudden violent curves generated by the crack of a whip. To me, as a judge, I interpret that as meaning the lines that you have need to be curved. It doesn't necessarily have to be this strong S shape, although that is very common in some of the things, but you don't have to have that S whip shape. Although I have met some judges who disagree with me on that subject. Plant material, anything from acanthus, anemone, aster, calla lilies are big because they show you a big, strong, linear quality. And you can manipulate their stems fairly easily to curve them. And calla lilies in the artwork of the time were especially common. Fern, freesia, honeysuckle, hydrangea, iris, lilac, lily, pansy, poppy, pussy willow, tulip, wisteria, all kinds of branches, blossoms, seed heads, berries. It's very textural and very botanical. They use anything that's beautiful and light and airy in nature. And again, I just want to review briefly the principles of design, which is balance. And in this case, we're talking asymmetrical balance. Dominance, the line should be dominant. Contrast, there's not, the colors are usually soft and muted and, kind of harmonious. So there's not a huge amount of strong color contrast. The rhythm, as we've talked about, should be displayed in the curvilinear aspects of the design and the line. Proportion, the container can often be taller than the actual design. And the scale, the scale of the plant materials should be large enough to relate back to the container, but not overpower it. And the elements of design are light, space, line, form, size, pattern, texture, and color. To me, texture is a big one in this design. Nature is very textural, and you often look for texture to give you interest in this type of design where you have a minimal amount of plant material. I'm going to basically work on two different things. The first one will be this tall container. I do not own any Art Nouveau containers, so I have to make do with what I have. This one actually has a lot of florals and in the patterning, so I went with that. But the main key is that you need a narrow opening. You can't have a wide opening because you're going to just have a minimal amount of plant materials. So I chose this because it has a fairly narrow opening and it has the floral designs in it. And it has nice color combinations that will relate back to a natural setting. The other container I'm going to use is a smaller, but just almost as tall. But this has a lot of the Art Nouveau repetition of patterning on it. It has like these acanthus leaves coming up on it. And then it has these daisy kind of medallions on it. So I thought that had some aspects of the period. But again, that has a narrow opening at the top. So I'm just going to head into working on this. I have acrylic. I'm lucky to have a Harry Lauder walking stick. And so that's what I'm using for the line, for the branches. And you want to make sure you have good flow and a lot of curves in the branches. In both of these, I have used actually 3. A lot of times you'll just see, if you've got one that has a really good curve here and a really good curve here, which I didn't have any that were that curved, you can get by with just the 2, and that would give you a true whiplash base for your design. I am going to use, I had very little in my yard I could use. I have a few vines, but I got the roses from Safeway, and these were the biggest nicest roses that look more like a garden rose. Anything that you can get, if you have to purchase things, if it can look as much like it came from the garden as possible, that's very good. And I will start trying to get some of these placed. And I think because this container is so massive, I'm going to try to just use 5 of the roses to keep an odd number, but still keep it minimal. But we'll see. Once I work on the other plant materials, we'll see if I actually need 5 or not. I may start pulling things out if need be. I think I'm going to work with some other things first because this is looking pretty strong already. I think 3 would be plenty, and this is leading up into this curve. I'm just trying to get a little bit of this to act as a transition between the roses, with transitioning with some color in between them. It's sticking out too much. I'm just trying to get some transition here. I'm going to use this here again to try and pull a line up through there. And then, unfortunately, I had very, very few vines. I had one, I have one Confederate jasmine that has given me a couple vines that aren't dead. So I will I don't want to overwhelm the roses. They need to be the star of the show. And I always, when I'm doing an arrangement like this, where it's kind of out in the open, you want to get as much depth as you can. So you want to make sure that you get your plant materials that come all the way through the arrangement. I love to use variegated stuff at the back because the lighter colors will draw your eye, your visual intent all the way through the arrangement. And then I have some solid that I will mix in here so you don't have too much going on with your eye, and yet we still keep that. And then I don't have much to use to cover up my Oasis, and I am using Oasis. However, the new excuse me, the biodegradable product by Oasis now, that is it's like an Oasis block, although it's biodegradable. That is what I would prefer to use. However, I have not been able to find it locally, and I have not had a chance to get it, order it online. But I am going to be very soon getting a case of that so I can use that exclusively instead of the regular Oasis. And again, I like this false cypress because it is so textural. And in something like this, it sets it off, but it also gives it a very nice contrast of textures leading into the branches, because the woody branches are such a strong texture that. And when you don't have a whole lot of vines to work with, this also can give you a little bit of that feel of the vines. I don't want to get too much. I'm going to use a little bit of the asparagus fern that I brought in just to help cover this oasis a little bit. And again, I will use more of this towards the back just to cover up the oasis. I'm not going to finish this totally, but these sticks have to be well anchored or they won't stay where you want them to stay because they are heavy. I have to anchor that in a different hole. And I think that will be what, well, maybe more of these towards the back, just to, whoops, this is, and I'm going to do more. Seems to be a bit of a hole right there. And I think that's it for this one. And I'll give you a white background there to see that. Okay. And this is the front of this one. Again, I didn't have one that really swept over here, but you get the feel for this, especially because of this bottom one sweeping around. And I just did a shorter one here to kind of balance it off a little bit so I don't have to use so much plant material to create my balance. And this one I'm gonna use roses, but I think I'm gonna use these foxtail ferns, asparagus ferns, foxtail, to get a little bit of the greenery up high. These are I cut the smallest ones I had off my my ferns that again I brought these in from my deck, and that's one thing when you're doing an arrangement that you need to keep your plant materials to a minimum. You can often just strip down things so they're not as, in fact, I need to strip that down a little bit more and get things so they aren't quite as bold. And this is a very thin one that has just come out. And I'm going to try and, I don't want to get too much. I think I'll wait on that and see how the other things go. These roses are not in very good shape, but they were I was able to really open them up and make them look more like a garden rose. I don't want to keep I want to keep them clustered so they are linear, but I kind of want to turn them differently so it's not a straight line, so it looks more organic. Looks like they're growing there naturally a little more. And since this is a white container, I bought a little bit of this very delicate white, because a lot of times if you have a white container, you want to have some white in your arrangement to kind of balance it to the container. Plus, using small scale delicate plant materials for something this size gives you better balance and scale. And you can also, something delicate, you can actually broaden your line without overpowering it as well. The further I go down here, the more I need to tuck these things in a little more because I don't want my line to get too broad. And again, I'm going to go back with the regular asparagus fern and get this in tight. Probably could have done a better job of cutting this oasis down a little so I didn't have so much to cover up. Something else that would have worked well here would have been some Spanish moss to use because that's a lighter tone and that would have blended in with the container and covered up the oasis. But I don't have any of that right now. I think this asparagus fern is light enough that it's, and again, you want to bring your materials all the way through so you have good depth. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that, but you need to bring things all the way through so you have depth when you look through. Again, I love to use variegated stuff in the back so it really pulls your eye through. And provides interest. And I like to have materials in several different places in the design. So I'm basically creating a frame around the roses, but I'm using texture to keep it interesting. But also using materials that are not weighty, so it doesn't interfere with the lightness of the design. And I think I just need a little more green to anchor the side. And I think I've overdone it with this, so I'm going to take that out. Because you want to see the beauty of the branches. You don't want to cover those up with so much. And I think that will be basically that one. Thank you very much. Oh, I do have just a few of these. Usually with you know, the vines and stuff, a lot of times you can use the vines to get the lines, but I don't have any that are really interesting. They're all pretty straight, so I'm just not even gonna work with those. But I've also seen people kind of weave some of the vines up through the branches if you don't have a really interesting branch like the walking stick. If you're using a straighter or, you know, something that doesn't have a lot of things coming off of it, you can weave a vine through the branches to give it some interest. So that's my tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My cell phone is 757-375-5436, and I'm happy to talk to anyone at any time about this. I also have a lot of this Harry Lauder walking stick. I had a large bush and we're re-landscaping, so I'm having to cut down my bush. And so I've been cutting off on it. I don't want to give things away, but I'm happy to let anybody use it, borrow branches or whatever for their arrangement. And I've got them on the floor in my garage. So just give me a call if you want to use a couple branches for your arrangement. Thank you.